By 2003, the superhero genre was gaining legitimacy. Spider-Man had become a global phenomenon, and X2 had shown the world that superhero sequels could be both impactful and high quality. Studios began exploring Marvel's deeper bench, characters with darker tones and more morally complicated worlds. 20th Century Fox chose Daredevil. This is Marvel In Memoriam.
With great power comes great responsibility.
What more could I lose?
I am the X-Men.
Avengers!
I love you 3000.
Welcome back to Marvel In Memoriam, brought to you by the Fandom Memorandum. Now, unlike the aspirational hero we find in Spider-Man, Daredevil is gritty, religious, angry, urban. His world wasn't beautiful Manhattan skylines, it was brick, rain, alleyways. He's a dark, brooding character. In 2003, Fox attempted to adapt this character in all of its complexity, and it became one of the more debated adaptations of the era. The film opens in Hell's Kitchen, introducing Matt Murdock as the son of Jack the Devil Murdock, a boxer struggling to stay afloat in a neighborhood dominated by organized crime. Young Matt idolizes his father, believing him to be an honest fighter. One night, however, Matt follows Jack and discovers that he is connected to local mob figures. Shocked and disillusioned, Matt runs away in emotional turmoil and into the street, where a forklift dodges him and punctures a barrel carrying hazardous chemicals. The toxic waste spills over him and blinds him permanently. In the aftermath, Matt discovers that his remaining senses have been amplified to extraordinary levels. He develops what the film visualizes as a radar-like perception, the ability to see the world through sound, vibration, and spatial awareness. Following the accident, Jack becomes desperate. He wants to provide his son a good life, but he also wants to prove himself worthy of his son's admiration. He's ordered by mob boss Fallon to throw his next fight. He agrees initially under pressure, but during the match he hears Matt cheering him on from the crowd. That moment changes him. Instead of taking the dive, Jack fights back and wins. For defying the mob's orders, he's murdered. The trauma of that loss defines Matt's adulthood. Years later, Matt has become a defense attorney dedicated to protecting the innocent. By night, he dons the identity of Daredevil, operating outside the law to punish criminals who evade justice. One day, Matt meets Elektra, a wealthy and highly trained martial artist. A relationship blooms immediately and intensely, defined by shared aggression and emotional volatility. Meanwhile, crime in Hell's Kitchen is orchestrated by Wilson Fisk, known publicly as a legit businessman, but privately as the Kingpin, head of the mob. Fisk hires the assassin Bullseye to eliminate Nicholas Nachios, Elektra's father. In the chaos that follows, Daredevil intervenes, but Bullseye manipulates events so that Elektra believes Daredevil killed her father. Driven by grief, Elektra trains obsessively and seeks revenge. Daredevil, meanwhile, discovers Kingpin's involvement and confronts Bullseye in a cathedral battle that merges Catholic symbolism with brutal violence. In the final confrontation, Matt battles Kingpin in close quarters, though enraged, he refuses to kill him, choosing instead to hand him over to the legal system. Elektra, mortally wounded earlier in her quest for revenge, dies in Matt's arms after learning the truth. The film ends with Matt recommitting himself to both identities, attorney and vigilante, and continuing to walk the line between justice and vengeance. Directed by Mark Steven Johnson, Daredevil embraced the aesthetic of early 2000s superhero cinema, stylized slow motion, dramatic lighting, and a soundtrack reflective of the era's rock culture. Ben Affleck, a longtime fan of the character, actively pursued the role. His portrayal leans heavily into Matt's internal conflict, the tension between rage and restraint. Critics were divided. The theatrical cut was criticized for uneven pacing and tonal inconsistency. However, the later director's cut restored significant legal subplot material, grounding Matt more firmly in his profession and improving the narrative structure. Financially, the film earned over $180 million worldwide. Not a disaster, but not a breakout success either. Thematically, the film is about restraint. Matt operates outside the system, but he refuses to become an executioner. His Catholic faith is central. Unlike many vigilantes, Daredevil does not believe he has the right to end a life. That moral line defines him. Elektra opens by revealing that she survived her apparent death and was revived by Stick, a blind martial arts master who trains her in mystical disciplines. Now operating as a professional assassin, Elektra is hired to kill Mark Miller and his daughter Abby. However, after forming a connection with them, she refuses to complete the mission. This act of defiance draws the attention of The Hand, a shadowy ninja organization with mystical undertones. The Hand sends a team of supernatural assassins to eliminate Elektra and capture Abby, who they believe may be a powerful figure known as the Treasure. As Elektra protects Mark and Abby, she confronts her own childhood trauma and her father's murder. She ultimately defeats Kirigi, leader of the Hand, symbolically rejecting the cycle of violence that shaped her life. The film ends with Elektra stepping away from assassination and toward personal redemption. Elektra was developed quickly as a spin-off rather than as part of a long-term franchise strategy. Its smaller budget is evident in its limited scale and contained settings. Critically, the film was poorly received and underperformed financially, earning under $60 million worldwide. Its mystical tone felt disconnected from the grounded crime drama of Daredevil. However, thematically, it continues the idea introduced in Daredevil, choosing restraint over vengeance. Her arc mirrors Matt's. Both characters must decide whether violence defines them or whether they can redefine themselves. Now, as always in this pre-Avengers Doomsday era, we must assume doom. But first, spoiler warning. Spoilers. Spoilers. If we treat Daredevil and Elektra as canon within the wider Marvel multiverse, then their narrative trajectories do not end with their original films. In Deadpool and Wolverine, audiences see Elektra again, not in New York, not in Hell's Kitchen, but in the Void. The Void, as previously established in Loki, is a temporal wasteland, a dumping ground for pruned timelines and erased realities. It is a place where discarded stories go to decay. This detail reframes Elektra's cinematic fate. The Void is not merely a graveyard, it's a collection of fragments, broken timelines, abandoned characters, and failed realities coexisting in a chaotic landscape. In the comics, especially in Secret Wars, Doctor Doom does not create Battleworld from nothing. He constructs it from the remnants of dying universes, patching together fragments into a single authoritarian structure. If the MCU adapts even a loose version of that concept, it requires a holding space for broken realities. The Void is that space. Doctor Doom is no simple conqueror. He reorganizes. If the multiverse destabilizes, Doom may determine that survival requires consolidation. The Void would be an ideal foundation. It already contains fragments of erased timelines. It exists outside conventional temporal flow. It's unclaimed territory. Where others see decay, Doom would see raw material. Reshaping the Void into Battleworld would not require conquering intact universes. It would require repurposing the ruins. In that scenario, Elektra's presence there becomes symbolically significant. She represents a character whose world was not strong enough to sustain itself within the old system. Now she exists in a narrative limbo, a discarded fragment of pre-MCU Marvel history. Doom could gather those fragments. When we look at pre-MCU Marvel films, Blade, Daredevil, Elektra, Spider-Man, many of those universes feel isolated, disconnected, vulnerable even. The Void offers a place to gather those isolated continuities into a single narrative space, and Doom, more than anyone, has the philosophical drive to do it. These two movies belong to a transitional time period. They were darker than Spider-Man, less cohesive than the X-Men, and they lacked the vision the Marvel Studios would later implement. But they were important, albeit uneven, unfocused, imperfect, but important. They played a role in shaping Marvel cinema, for good or bad, and who knows, they may yet have a role to play. If you like what you saw here today, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace!